feel about Mr. Burks denying that you are his daughter after all these years?
30 years old, and I have to deal with this?
Who you say is definitely not your biological daughter. Here to prove that in court so you can return home and get the debt erased from your record. And you are devastated that he is now claiming you are not his biological daughter.
I am hurt, I'm disappointed, have a question of how I feel. I'm 30 years old. It was a one-night stand with my mom and all that kind of stuff like that. It wasn't no one-night stand. You know it. It hurts me so much and I have a lot of pain. You know, it's ridiculous to me.
All your life, you've known him to be your father?
Yes, Your Honor. And it's just like, how could you come up with this?
I'm 25 years old. I'm in the military, and I had a career to protect. I met a mother at a restaurant in the drive-through window. So I was young, trying to, get my Mac on. I'm Mac Daddy. This, after work, after I get off work. So I went back after work, and I picked her up, and we went to a hotel. I did my thing, but I...
Every episode inside Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom becomes a masterclass in the collision between human emotion and the machinery of law. What starts as simple disputes about child support or paternity always unfolds into something larger. Questions about justice, forgiveness, identity, and the fragility of truth itself. In these stories, evidence isn't just paper. It's pain documented, regret recorded, and hope tested. As the echoes of the last verdict fade, the reality sets in. The DNA may confirm blood, but it can't guarantee bond. That's what makes Lauren Lake's courtroom different. It isn't only about determining who fathered a child. It's about confronting the deeper moral questions of why so many lives unravel when faced with the truth they demanded. Across these episodes, Judge Lake's voice becomes both compass and conscience. She reminds viewers and litigants alike that while science may reveal the facts, the concept of justice in jurisprudence depends on how we handle those facts. And in that courtroom, justice isn't mechanical, it's deeply human. Take Mr. Burks and Miss Brown's case. A 30-year-old wound reopened under fluorescent lights and courtroom silence. When Judge Lake reads the words, "You are the father," it's not just the conclusion of a case. It's the start of a reckoning decades overdue. For 30 years, Miss Brown carried the identity of daughterhood, believing in a man who, in her eyes, defined family. For Mr. Burks, it was 30 years of suppressed doubt and emotional exile. This is where the relationship between law and justice becomes painfully visible. The law sees a debt, a record, a name on child support documents, but justice sees the trembling voice of a daughter who grew up believing in love, and a father too ashamed of his past to face his truth. Judge Lake understands this duality, and she uses her courtroom not as a battlefield, but as a bridge between evidence and emotion. She references adverse inference in the Evidence Act, the idea that silence, avoidance, or refusal to test can itself be a statement. When people run from truth, that very avoidance becomes the loudest evidence against them. In this way, Judge Lake's courtroom becomes a living laboratory for what philosophers call moral jurisprudence. Law guided not just by logic, but by compassion and moral reasoning. This is what makes paternity court more than entertainment. It's legal restoration with human depth. It's a space where emotional testimonies mirror the kind shared in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, moments of brokenness, where truth becomes the first step toward healing. When Miss Brown's sister stands to defend her saying, "We grew up believing we were sisters. He told us that," the courtroom becomes more than legal ground. It becomes sacred space. This is where Judge Lake's philosophy shines brightest. Truth isn't meant to destroy. It's meant to rebuild with clarity. The courtroom shifts again. New faces, new stories, same aching theme. Miss Goddard's fight against Mr. Harrison becomes a cautionary tale about youth, impulsiveness, and manipulation. She says he purposefully impregnated her to stop her from going to college, to anchor her life before it could take flight. It's a haunting accusation that touches on issues deeper than paternity: control, consent, and responsibility. This is where Lauren Lake transforms from judge into educator. She addresses the courtroom as if speaking to a generation. Love without accountability is chaos. Her words carry the weight of the Divorce Course podcast, an echo of every episode where broken relationships are dissected, not just for entertainment, but for lessons. She knows that relationships collapse not merely because of betrayal, but because of ignorance of consequence. Every action has a legal echo. Every decision has an evidentiary shadow. As Miss Goddard presents her receipts, proof of college orientation fees, dorm expenses, textbooks, it becomes clear she's not suing just for money. She's suing for validation, for proof that her pain mattered, for recognition that the path she lost was stolen, not surrendered. Mr. Harrison, meanwhile, stands behind his legal defense. I tried to get a DNA test for months. His tone is cold, factual, procedural. But Judge Lake knows that law without empathy is as dangerous as love without honesty. She reminds him of a truth rarely spoken in family court. A DNA test can clear your name, but it can't clear your conscience. And when the results reveal that he is the father, his composure falters. The legal question is settled, but the moral one begins. How do you rebuild a relationship founded on lies and avoidance? How do you father a child you once denied? The audience understands this is the tragedy of truth. People regret taking DNA tests not because they reveal lies, but because they strip away the illusion of comfort. This is the painful beauty of paternity court. It reminds us that the pursuit of truth is easy to demand, but hard to endure. That's why so many people in real life delay, avoid, or sabotage DNA tests. Because as Judge Lake often says, once the truth is spoken, you can't unhear it. In the final story, Miss Martin and Mr. Demere's case turns the courtroom into a study of modern relationships, where texts, screenshots, and social media become evidence exhibits. Their 4-year-old daughter, Amaya, becomes the innocent center of adult chaos. The heartbreaking moment comes when Miss Martin plays a video of her daughter softly crying. "Daddy always makes me sad." The courtroom falls still. It's not just testimony. It's a mirror to every child who suffers in silence while adults debate truth. Mr. Demere insists that Amaya isn't his child. He waves text messages as proof, cites her talking to other men, and accuses her of infidelity. But under Judge Lake's steady questioning, it becomes clear his real motive isn't doubt, it's hurt. Here, Judge Lake bridges law and theology, referencing ideas that could fill entire Celebrate Recovery testimonies or adoption stories full episodes. She reminds them both. Children don't care about your text messages, they care about your presence. When the DNA results confirm that Mr. Demere is the father, the truth lands like thunder. His tears are silent, his face heavy with shame. The audience feels it, the unmistakable mix of regret and redemption. Judge Lake leans forward with a rare softness. "That child still loves you," she says. "Don't waste that grace." This moment embodies everything the Game-Changing Attorney podcast talks about. The power of truth to redefine lives. The intersection of law and humanity, and how every courtroom can be a place of transformation. Miss Martin weeps quietly. It's not victory she feels, but release. The truth hurts, yes, but it also ends confusion. Judge Lake often says, this courtroom is not about punishment, it's about clarity, and that clarity can save families if they let it. These cases, taken together, form a trilogy of emotional jurisprudence. A study of what happens when DNA, denial, and destiny intersect. They could easily be featured in the Divorce Course podcast or analyzed in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast as examples of how truth reshapes both family and law. Each person who walks into Judge Lake's courtroom thinks they're there to prove something about someone else, but they leave having learned something about themselves. That's the transformative power of truth in family law. One moment, it feels like therapy, the next like philosophy. And through it all, the themes echo. People regret taking DNA tests because truth removes comfort. Evidence isn't always physical, it's emotional. Justice isn't revenge, it's understanding. Law without compassion becomes cruelty. And every relationship, romantic or parental, is built on fragile threads of trust. In the end, the lesson Judge Lauren Lake imparts isn't written in any statute or precedent. It's a moral decree born of experience. The truth may hurt, but lies destroy. Her words resonate like the closing line of a sermon, a podcast, and a verdict all at once. They belong equally in the halls of the Supreme Court and the quiet rooms of broken homes. Because whether it's a $26,000 debt, a lost college dream, or a child longing for her father's love, every case carries the same underlying truth. DNA proves biology, but love proves humanity. In this courtroom, truth isn't just revealed, it's reborn. And every verdict, every confession, and every tear is a reminder that the law can declare who we are, but only compassion can define who we become. When truth meets the courtroom, lives unravel. Because in Judge Lauren Lake's court, DNA doesn't just reveal bloodlines, it exposes everything people tried to hide. In a world where relationships collapse under the weight of secrets and denial, one courtroom becomes the stage for truth, raw, unfiltered, and irreversible. Judge Lauren Lake stands at the center of it all, turning whispers of doubt into declarations of fact. This isn't just about parenthood. It's about justice, accountability, and the cost of knowing the truth. For some, the DNA test is a lifeline. For others, it's a moment they'll forever regret taking. This triple case saga begins in paternity court, where emotions spill like open wounds. What unfolds here is more than a legal proceeding. It's a moral reckoning. A father denies his 30-year-old daughter. A young couple battles over a child conceived in confusion and resentment. And another woman faces the man who questions the very identity of her 4-year-old daughter. Each case is different, but every heart in that courtroom beats with one shared fear. What if the truth changes everything? Judge Lauren Lake isn't just reading test results. She's navigating the turbulent sea between law and justice. Every question she asks, every ruling she delivers, embodies the eternal tension between what the law defines and what the heart knows. Legal minds might call it adverse inference in the Evidence Act, when silence, avoidance, or deceit become forms of evidence themselves. But to those sitting in her courtroom, it's much simpler. Either you are the parent, or you are not. The first story captures decades of pain condensed into one shocking revelation. Mr. Burks, burdened by years of child support debt, insists he's been wrongly tied to a daughter he never believed was biologically his. For 30 years, Miss Brown called him Dad. She celebrated birthdays with him, confided in him, and believed their bond was rooted in truth. But as she stands before Judge Lake now, her voice trembles under disbelief. I'm hurt. I'm disappointed. How could he even question me after all these years? Her words echo the anguish of thousands of celebrate recovery testimonies. Those who believed love could survive denial. Those who discovered that truth cuts deeper than betrayal. Mr. Burke's story, on the other hand, echoes countless divorce course podcast confessions, where men speak of relationships destroyed by doubt, pride, or silence. He claims it was never love, just a one-night stand. Yet even he admits he paid for diapers, offered money, and stayed quiet to protect his military career. He says it wasn't about the child. It was about saving his name. When Judge Lauren Lake lifts the evidence, the missing name on the birth certificate, the decades of unpaid support, and the testimony of pain, she reminds him, legal absence doesn't erase emotional presence. But what truly breaks the courtroom is not the paperwork. It's the distance. The way father and daughter talk like strangers. It's a textbook study in the relationship between law and justice. The law saw Mr. Burks as the father by default. Justice, however, demands something deeper. Accountability, truth, and compassion. And when the DNA test results come in, silence sweeps through the room. He is the father, For Miss Brown, vindication feels hollow. For Mr. Burks, the truth feels heavier than his $26,000 debt. And for Judge Lake, it's another reminder that DNA doesn't heal relationships. It only proves where the healing must. Begin. The second story unfolds like a podcast episode of The Game. Changing Attorney meets the Divorce Course podcast. It's a mix of law, emotion, and moral accountability. Miss Goddard, a young woman on the brink of college success, sues Mr. Harrison, the man she claims intentionally got her pregnant to keep her from leaving. Her dreams of education crumble under the weight of motherhood, and now she seeks not just justice, but closure. Judge Lauren Lake listens carefully, her questions cutting to the core. You're saying he purposefully impregnated you, that he took your future away? Miss Goddard's voice shakes. Yes, Your Honor, he told me himself. But Mr. Harrison stands unmoved. We were in love, he says. She's lying. I tried for months to get a DNA test because I know that baby isn't mine. The evidence, text messages, calendars, and college payment receipts becomes a web of contradiction. Miss Goddard admits she was unfaithful once. Mr. Harrison admits he wanted a child. Neither is innocent. Both are trapped in their own version of the truth. For Judge Lake, it's not just a paternity question. It's a study in the concept of justice in jurisprudence. She reminds them both that actions have consequences, that consent without responsibility is chaos. When Miss Goddard's mother testifies, her pain fills the courtroom. My daughter turned her life around. She had honors. She was accepted to college. Then this happened. It's not just about a baby. It's about a future stolen. The audience feels it. That mixture of empathy and frustration, because in the courtroom, love stories become legal files and heartbreak becomes evidence. When the DNA results are revealed, they confirm what neither side expected. Mr. Harrison is the father. The courtroom exhales. Miss Goddard cries. Her mother whispers, "Now you know." But Judge Lake, always aware of the deeper layer, leans forward and says softly, "Now that you have the truth, you have responsibility." It's not a celebration, it's a reckoning, a moment where truth exposes the emotional wreckage beneath. For anyone listening to the Divorce Course podcast or Celebrate Recovery testimonies, this story would feel painfully familiar. It's about what happens when the truth you demanded finally arrives and changes everything you thought you knew. The third story hits even harder. Miss Martin and Mr. Demir stand before Judge Lake, arguing over a 4-year-old girl named Amaya. Miss Martin accuses him of emotional cruelty and favoritism. She plays a heartbreaking video. Amaya, with tears in her eyes, saying, "Daddy always makes me sad." The courtroom falls silent. But behind that innocence lies a storm of accusations. Cheating, lies, text messages, and insecurities. Mr. Demir claims Miss Martin had a rotation of men. She denies it, swearing that he's the only one. Evidence is exchanged. Messages are read aloud. Flirtations, betrayals, and one infamous line that shakes the room. "Come sit on my face." It's messy, it's raw. But beneath the chaos, Judge Lake searches for truth. Not just genetic truth, but emotional truth. The kind that defines justice beyond law. When the paternity results confirm that Mr. Demir is indeed the father, the courtroom transforms again. He breaks down, realizing the weight of his neglect. "I feel heartbroken," he says, staring at the floor. "I should have been there." It's a scene that could easily be replayed on the Divorce Course podcast or dissected in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast. Because at its heart, it's not about DNA, it's about redemption. It's about men learning that love can't exist without responsibility, and women realizing that truth must come before peace. Across these cases, Judge Lauren Lake stands like a modern philosopher of the courtroom, blending legal rigor with human empathy. Her work reflects what jurisprudence has always sought, the balance between truth and mercy. She reminds each participant, and every viewer, that DNA may settle facts, but it can't restore trust. Justice is not just about being right, it's about doing right. For some, that truth destroys them. For others, it sets them free. Because in every courtroom moment, in every whispered, "You are the father," and every sob of realization, we see the same lesson repeated. The truth changes everything. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, justice doesn't end when the DNA envelope is opened. It begins there. Each result is more than a scientific confirmation. It's a doorway to a deeper moral truth. The courtroom becomes a living parable, a place where faith and law, heartbreak and healing collide and coexist. And through it all, Judge Lake stands as both jurist and guide, showing that justice without compassion is empty, and compassion without accountability is chaos. This is the essence of the relationship between law and justice. It's what ancient philosophers tried to define, what modern podcasts like the Game Changing Attorney podcast and the Divorce Course podcast attempt to analyze, and what every tearful litigant in this courtroom learns firsthand. The law exists to define rights, but justice exists to restore souls. As the stories of Mr. Burks, Miss Goddard, and Miss Martin echo through the walls of the courtroom, a pattern emerges, not one of shame, but of revelation. Every participant entered this space expecting vindication. They wanted Judge Lake to prove something about someone else, but every verdict forced them to confront something within themselves. Mr. Burks, who spent decades denying his daughter, faced not just his child, but his conscience. His story mirrors those found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies. Tales of men who spent years burying regret until one moment of truth set them free. The pain of acknowledgement became the beginning of redemption. Miss Brown's tears were the tears of a woman reclaiming her identity after 30 years of quiet invalidation. She represents thousands who grow up believing love is enough, only to learn that even love requires proof. The DNA result didn't just confirm her lineage, it confirmed her worth. This is what Judge Lake calls the sacred work of restoration. In her courtroom, truth isn't punishment, it's purification. And the power of that truth is what transforms law into justice. In the Goddard versus Harrison case, the themes of control, consent, and consequence reached a painful crescendo. A young woman's college dream was derailed, her future rewritten. Her claim that a man intentionally got her pregnant raised one of the most difficult moral questions in family law. When love turns into manipulation, how should justice respond? Judge Lauren Lake handled the question not with cold logic but with layered wisdom. She invoked principles reminiscent of jurisprudence and ethics, blending legal precedent with moral inquiry. Her words could easily be quoted in a Supreme Court decision or a classroom debate. The law cannot regulate the heart, but it can hold it accountable. This is the bridge between jurisprudence and grace. The understanding that while courts can't fix emotional scars, they can acknowledge them. In that acknowledgement lies validation, and validation is the first form of healing. Miss Goddard's story, though personal, represents a broader truth about generational patterns. Her mother's emotional testimony, recalling her own teen struggles, mirrored countless adoption stories, full episodes where cycles of abandonment and pain repeat until someone finally decides to break them. When the DNA test confirmed Mr. Harrison was the father, the courtroom didn't erupt in joy. It settled into solemnity. The truth was undeniable, but so was the damage. Miss Goddard's mother wept, not for victory, but for the years of lost opportunity, and Judge Lake's closing words became a quiet anthem for responsibility. Truth doesn't erase the past. It teaches us how to stop repeating it. That is the heart of the Divorce Course podcast philosophy. That the end of one relationship can become the beginning of wisdom, if only we're brave enough to listen. The final case, Martin v. Demir, felt like a mirror held up to a modern generation, where affection is traded for attention and love competes with digital distraction. The case was more than a dispute over child support or infidelity. It was a reflection of how fragile human connection becomes when mistrust replaces dialogue. Amaya's video, "Daddy always makes me sad," echoed beyond that courtroom. It became a collective confession for every parent too wounded by pride to notice a child's pain. Judge Lauren Lake didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence after the video played was judgment enough. This case embodied one of the hardest truths about parenthood. You can win a paternity test and still lose your child's trust. For years, Mr. Demir had let his anger masquerade as logic. He believed evidence would clear his name, but all it did was expose his distance. Judge Lake's response was not a reprimand. It was a revelation. "Science can prove you're a father," she said softly, "but only love can make you one." It was a moment that resonated far beyond the cameras, the kind of truth that belongs in both the Supreme Court and the church pew. Because justice, at its highest form, always transcends the courtroom. When the DNA results confirmed his paternity, Mr. Demir's silence spoke louder than any testimony. The same silence we see in recovery programs, confessionals, and courtroom benches. That heavy realization that truth and regret often share the same space. He broke down, whispering words that weren't for the court, but for himself. "I should have been there." That moment became a celebrate recovery testimony in itself. A man stripped